Oh, what happened there? We had a little technical glitch, but I'm back. And as I said, and I promised I was going to do today is entertainment day. I promised I was going to do something about aliens. So I got to do something about aliens because, I'm a Gen Xer. This is Gen X Rants. What better thing to talk about than aliens? So, Alien is originally a movie from 19. Let's go. I'm going to share my screen here. Whoops. All right, let's screen share. Let's go to the information. We're going to use Wikipedia, of course. Wikipedia. So, Alien, the very first movie I ever saw in the Alien franchise back in. This is pretty old, so I didn't see it at this date. 1979. That's crazy. 1979. So, the movie franchise began, gosh, if I'm 49, that makes 46 years ago. So I was 4 years old, but I didn't watch this when I was 4 years old. I watched this movie when I was probably 8 or 9, and I saw it, and it was really freaky because there's this scene that happens in it that just traumatized me when I was a kid, where the alien had implanted basically in one of the guys, and then spoiler alert for those that haven't seen this movie that's 46 years old. Um, So Kane, who's one of the guys, and he got the face hugger on the mask, and he burned through, and we didn't really know what was happening, but he'd implanted something, and they're eating. So as a kid, I'm like, I don't know, I must have hid my face during some of this. So when they're sitting in the mess hall and they're eating, I'm like, oh man! And then he starts, and then it bursts out of his chest. What I didn't understand is, I think I lacked context. Context. Maybe I saw that scene specifically on TV at the time, and what had happened was, yeah, the chest burster had come out of him, out of Kane, um, and I thought because he would eat in the spaghetti, there was an alien in the spaghetti. So psychologically, I was traumatized a bit towards spaghetti for a while, and then I watched the whole thing, where at least I got context for it and I understood where it was. But that's where my interest. This was like science horror almost. Like the '80s was big with that. You got Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, all those things kind of stem from the '70s and the '80s, um, and it really traumatized. Like we were watching stuff back when we should not have been, RoboCop, all that sort of stuff. But so this has kind of traumatized me, but it caught my interest in the Alien franchise. Sigourney Weaver was a strong female lead in that movie. She wasn't overdone, didn't know everything, got scared. The way the alien picked off everybody one by one was fascinating, and it really like left an impression on me. And it was just fantastic. So I'm just gonna play screen sharing the entire screen so that you can see what I'm seeing. So that was the movie poster for it, and it was like in space. The big catchphrase was like, "In space, nobody can hear you scream," which was an excellent thing because everybody was kind of excited about space travel and stuff like that. So it's great. It was a great franchise. Wow. That's all I can say about that. Next in line, and oh, sorry, the director of this was Ridley Scott. So this is one of Ridley Scott. That just tells you how old Ridley Scott probably is. But that was developed by Ridley Scott. So his name's going to come back up. So he had done this, started the franchise. The idea came from him. Um, there's all sorts of in-depth stuff about the alien itself and how Giger, I believe his name was, had created the original alien. He was this guy. Was a little like loopy, little fruity for Cocoa Puffs or whatever. He was short. I don't know. The guy was a little bit deranged. Some of the scenes in there were a little bit strange, especially when you watch the extended edition. But uh, that's how that went. So going on to the next. Oh, we got a little problem here. I seem to stop sharing my screen. You know, technical glitches. Back in the '80s, they happened a lot more than I'd like to admit. Okay, we'll try that again. Well, you know what? We'll just do it. We'll do it live. We'll do it live. All right, I'll try that again. There we go. All right, my favorite of all time. This is my all-time favorite movie is Aliens. Aliens was released in, so it was quite a big gap, by the way, 1986 by James Cameron. And this is James Cameron had also done a couple of years before this Terminator. So James Cameron had a name for himself, and I had watched Terminator as well. But it wasn't because of name recognition that I was interested. It was because of the Alien franchise. And when I watched this, I was hooked. There are so many one-liners that came from this movie. Game over. Uh, Hicks, he's or Hudson, he's Hicks. All those kind of funny things. I guess we might as well, nuke it from space. Nuke it from space. That's the only way to be sure. All those kind of famous sayings came from that. So Terminator had a bunch of one-liners. Aliens had a bunch of one-liners. But the this was like it was awesome because the movie was about colonial marines, right? These are like the toughest of the tough, and they came in and they just got their butts handed to them. But it was good. It was a really good build up. The trauma of what Ripley had gone through with the alien. She had to inject it at the end of the first movie, so she got away. She was the only sole survivor. She blew up the mining ship that she had been on, and so Wayland Yutani had owned all that, and it was quite a bit years because she drifted in space. So they picked her up. They got her re-engaged. She had a lot of nightmare, a lot of PTSD from the first movie, and so the second movie really built on that. So Cameron did an excellent job building up on the previous story, but not making it exactly the same. As I said, it was colonial Marines. We're going to go in there rough and tough and gunning. In the first movie, they just had flamethrowers, simple stuff, but they couldn't stop the alien. It wasn't. It was immune almost to those things. I mean, it did scurry away from the flamethrowers, but it didn't kill it. So in this, you thought, oh yeah, they got the guns. Um, they're going to beat the aliens. They're just hands down, but they did not. And they went to a colony where the colony, and it's interesting if you watch the extended edition to this movie, which is great. It kind of builds up to that. How did the aliens get into this colony? And basically, Wayland Yutani, you find out, had sent a bunch of people there. And from the first movie, LV4, I can't remember the name. LV, let's go to the actual movie. I should know this, like I've watched this movie so many times. LV-426, sorry. So they had gone to the planet LV-426, which is from the first movie, where Kanan got the alien burster. So they set up a colony and found that ship, and then of course, what's going to happen? Like the whole, uh, basically, the settlement had got wiped out, chest bursters, but only one survivor was Newt, and she had hidden in the shafts. And they built that relationship between Newt and Ripley, and it was really good. And Ripley had to once again, step up despite these, the power of these Marines and Space Marines with these guns and stuff. She was the one that had to step up. I liked it was just great built. Wayland Yutani, when uh, basically you find out at the end, like Burke, who was the guy that he had actually set up the settlement, knowing what was going on, and he worked for Wayland Yutani. He's like a grease monk, like a greasy, basically like executive trying to work his way up in Wayland Yutani. So they built that side. Of 80s was always about like the big evil corporations, right? So it was a big thing, whether it be OCP, Wayland Yutani, I think. All sorts of movies. It was always about corporations. Corporations, the government were the good guys, and the corporations were the bad guys. And how quickly that turned around in society, right? So that was an excellent, excellent movie. Got to watch it. I don't want to spoil the ending, but in the first movie, there's an android you find out who's actually bad guy. In the second movie, Aliens, there's an android, and it's very interesting. Great character. I'm not going to spoil that because that's one movie I don't want to spoil. So moving on from that, I hyped, like I was hooked. I bought the VHS of that movie. I watched that sucker like 1,000 times. I could not get enough of it. And then we moved on to something that really drove me away from the franchise, which was this terrible, terrible movie that I did not enjoy. Alien 3. Now, Sigourney Weaver had grown a bit sour, I think, on the franchise. She basically, as many actors want to do, she didn't want to keep playing and get typecast uh, with the Alien franchise. So she had gone the route of saying, if I'm going to do this, you're going to kill off my character. She had a lot of back and forth with 20th Century Fox. I kind of do blame Sigourney Weaver for the direction this took. I don't think it's all her fault. But the fact is, and many actors are kind of this way, they don't want to do universe franchises, whether that be Captain America, Robert Downey Jr., all these people. Actors don't want to be shoeboxed inside of something, even if they get paid millions and millions of dollars because they're creative, right? So going from there, I saw this in theaters when I was young. I came out in 92. So I was probably 16 or 17 at the time, and it's definitely a rated R movie, by the way. Not, it was, anyways. So right away they set up the survivors, except for Ripley, had died because some of them had made it out. Newt being one of them, the young girl, as well as Hicks. Um, from Aliens, right? Although he was hurt at the end. So in the Solenko, basically, again, I don't want to spoil it all. You can read it. But Hicks and the girl and her get away. But the immediate build up to this story. So instead of kind of building a logical progression, which is the colonial Marines must have wanted to grab the ship, right? Get all this information about what had happened and probably, you know, build a good storyline off that. They had hinted at maybe going back to Earth, but that's not what happened at all. Alien 3 came along. Uh, it was ridiculous. I don't even want to go over it. It was terrible. It was terribly directed. It was terrible from start to finish. It really soured me on the franchise. I was like, this is not, it didn't have the taste of Alien, didn't have the flavor of Aliens. It was, weird. I think David Fincher, the director, I don't think it was all his fault when you watch the specials about this. It was really the studio pushed back on Fincher to do what they wanted, so he did a lot of reshoots. It wasn't really his vision. The script had been sitting in limbo because you see there's such a gap. I mean, there's what is that, a 6-year gap between movies, and you're going to see a pattern with this in this franchise. So Alien 3 is a bad taste in my mouth. Terrible storyline. They killed Ripley basically in the end. She had a queen inside of her. Queen popped up. She fell in lava. Ugh, terrible movie. Didn't enjoy it. If you liked it, yeah. I've watched it after that. Still didn't like it. In fact, I probably thought it was worse because the CG was terrible. The alien was terrible. The storyline was terrible. It just was terrible. All right, going on to the next. Alien Resurrection. So Alien Resurrection for me actually was, I felt, going back on track. I mean, it wasn't the best of the Alien franchises. It was way better than 3. Definitely not as good as 2 and not as good as Alien. They are different genres anyways, but Alien Resurrection, I really thought, okay, we're getting back to somewhere. It kind of tried to stitch things back together. The premise of the story is basically Wayland Yutani wanted to, and this is way in the future. So I think this movie was made in 97. So you got a 5-year gap, and it's 200 years in the future, right? After Alien 3. So they're trying to clone from the mixed DNA that they had of the alien and the alien queen in Ripley. They tried to clone and pull out the alien part of the alien queen because they wanted to use it for bioengineering. So this was actually not a bad storyline. I actually thought it was pretty good. It was well directed. I thought it had some good scary action parts. I liked the character. Uh, Ripley was played like Ripley, but not. It was almost like they created a third character, which is, I think, why Sigourney Weaver came back, because it was an interesting, you've got a clone of her, basically not quite the same, but not different. And when you watch it, you're like, wow, it's got shadows of like Ripley, but it's not Ripley. You can kind of tell till near the end when she kind of goes back. But that was actually, I would give this movie a solid 6.5 or 7 out of 10 if I were like, if Aliens was a 9.5 out of 10, Alien for me was about an 8 out of 10. Alien 3 was a 2 out of 10. I mean, I'd give it credit just for some of the acting. This was getting back to the norms, and I thought, oh, good, we're going somewhere. The problem with this is I believe it was not financially successful, right? So they had the budget back then, 97 of $70 million was like pretty high for 97. and the box office did not do well. They want to like quadruple their money, right? They want to make probably $300 million back then. So with at the end of the day, it didn't really make what they wanted. I don't think it really clicked with all the old school Alien fans. For me, it was a step in the right direction, and I hope they were going to go in a better direction. So that leads into the next. I mean, there's a big gap after this of going into the next one, which was Prometheus. So they took the word alien out of it and they put the word Prometheus. Uh, Prometheus is a Greek god, I believe, or something like that. I don't really care. It was 2012 they made this. So you're going from 97. You're talking a 15-year gap now. So they had basically put the franchise in limbo, except for I don't even like to Alien versus Predator. So in 2004 and 2007, they did two crossover franchises, Alien versus Predator. Now, Alien versus Predator, not too bad. I actually would give that movie a solid 6 out of 10. I'm not going to get too much into it. I am a Predator fan as well, but we're talking Predator 1 and 2. After that, I don't even know what they were thinking. They are cross franchises, though. They are in the same universe or world, I believe, so that made sense. But Alien versus Predator, it was okay, 6 out of 10. Alien versus Predator 2 was mentally disturbing. I never want to watch that movie again. I would give it like a 1 out of 10. That was a terrible movie. So they did those two. Were hoping to build on the two franchises and make some money off that. They didn't. So they slept on the Alien franchise till Ridley Scott showed interest again. So Ridley Scott picked it back up in 2012. And made Prometheus. Again, he pulled out deliberately the alien part of it because this wasn't really about alien. Prometheus was more about the engineers, as they called them, because in the first movie, you saw this guy in a chair, huge guy, and they called him the engineer, I believe, in the first movie. That was just how they titled. No, they never said that, but that's where he was, and it looked like something had burst out of his chest, right? In the ship that had crashed and Kane got infected from the eggs. So what Ridley wanted to do was build the prequel basically to Alien, which was this. So you're not going to have Sigourney Weaver, you're not going to have the Colonial Marines. You've got to basically it took place. I don't know. It wasn't the greatest movie. Yeah, 2089. So basically in our future, but the past way before Alien. And trying to build on, well, how did the aliens get created in the first place? And basically, this is where the black goo thing started. And you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. Ridiculous. It basically made no biological sense. The movie was, I would say, it was good in the sense that it was a well produced and visually stunning movie. I'm not going to deny that it was actually pretty good for CGI, for effects, for things like that. I thought, but for the Alien franchise, it didn't make sense to me. And the storyline, the engineers, and all this buildup, I think he had it in his mind about all this, was not very good. So this, of course, was the distant moon LV 223. So the LVs, and they all travel there. The first one of the first androids that was successful, called David, made in the image of his creator. You basically David was the first android, basically, or at least the successful one, the most advanced one, and he didn't need to hibernate or sleep, so they hibernated while he looked after the ship. Built on his character, why he was there. He was basically there as a support character to um, Elizabeth Shaw. Ends up being interesting. Michael Fassbender, though, did an excellent job. Charlie Theron was likely the daughter of the guy. Uh, oh, there he is. So Guy Pearce played Peter Whalen. So Whalen, this is a precursor to Whalen Yutani, right? So this is and he was very old. He was trying to escape death because he was very old, and he thought that the engineers could help him. So what ended up the plot being was there was a frozen or hibernating engineer that they had found and gone to this planet, but also there was this alien or the black goo. The black goo plays a part. The engineers had created the black goo, which was a DNA transforming thing. It's just became ridiculous. It was really weird. I was very disappointed with the ending. So basically, it was like this is the transition into the alien. It was created with the black goo would kind of go inside of you. David had infected one of the crew members, one of the main characters, by the way. And at the end, of course, it's a girl because they have to have the girl escape. She gets away. Her and David, the head of David, so to speak. Excuse me, got a little bit of sinus running. It's cold in Canada. Um, and the engineer gets killed in a kind of a semi chest burster alien. It was weird in the end because remember the aliens take on the form of whatever they have taken. So I'd give this like a 5 out of 10. This movie, I was like, it was interesting in the beginning, and then as it went more and more on, it was like, this ain't so good. And as for money, it probably cost about 150 million more likely, and it only made 400. So successful enough. This was still under the umbrella at the time of 20th Century Fox, as you can see, distributed by 20th Century Fox. Now, next was, ugh, I get a sour taste in my mouth as we go further along. Alien Covenant. I'd like to call this alien garbage at this point. It got more and more ridiculous. So the character they had at the beginning, I don't even know if they paid this actress. I guess they would have had to. She basically was killed off immediately. Again, Ridley Scott's still directing, screenplay by somebody else, but continuing on. Uh, I barely remember this movie. It was that terrible. So again, David somehow about 24 years later, he has the Covenant ship. He takes all of the black goo, he drops it on the homeworld of the engineers, and basically I think Elizabeth Shaw is dead. He used her to experiment on. So basically, this evil David. So there is this ship that goes to them to discover what's going on. So way I think it's Wayland as well. Another copy of David, a more updated one, is there as well. So he's a good guy, but David is tricky, and so David starts using like he is basically bioengineering all this stuff, and basically they're making it out like he is the creator of alien species and he's fascinated by how this genetically is superior to humans and to him. So David the android is the creator of aliens, not just the engineer specifically. So he's been um, kind of directing their evolution, so to speak. So a bunch of people get affected. Another girl boss. Terrible movie. I give this like a 3 out of 10. It's interesting in spots, but the story just goes. David, of course, you know what's going to happen. It's predictable from beginning to end. You got a copy of David that's good. It's obviously he's going to die. So and David's going to switch places because they look alike, right? So I knew it was going to happen the second they introduced the other android. Um, it's terrible movie. Terrible way to take out the engineers. Didn't make sense. Didn't build on that story. What were they? How did they not know if they're so advanced? How did he sneak up on them? Didn't dwell with the engineers other than to kill them all off with the black goo. Terrible movie. Again, I give it like a 3. Not as bad as Alien 3, just because the visuals I thought were better in this. And then that is so budget of probably 125 million, I'm guessing. It only made 250 million, so it definitely did not make its budget back after you pay for advertising and all that other stuff. So, yeesh, terrible movie. And I just knew that this was it. I was done with the franchise after this movie. Left too many bad tastes in my mouth. I just realized I didn't know what they were doing. And that led to eventually Bob Iger. We are talking entertainment. Bob Iger, he just loves taking stuff over. So he took and bought out the entertainment side of 20th Century Fox, not the TV, but all the entertainment, I believe in 2018 or 2019, roughly. I might be off by a year or two. But he purchased 20th Century Fox for like $70 billion, way overpriced. Basically, because he wanted content. He wanted the X-Men and other things. Basically, he's just a guy that likes to spend money at this point. And then they created something called Alien Romulus. I've not seen this movie. The only reason for that is because of what Disney had done with a beloved franchise, Star Wars, which I will talk about later in another episode. We got lots of time. What they had done with the Marvel universe, and we'll talk about that. I didn't trust Disney with my precious franchise, which is Alien Romulus or Alien. I Some people had saw this and objectively said it wasn't too bad. It was probably better than Covenant, right? So going to Alien Romulus, I won't even read it because I didn't watch it, but it was on a budget of 80 million and made 351 million. So it did make its money. Some people did enjoy it, said they went a little bit back to the roots. I know that they brought in the android from the first Alien, and great actor that played him, by the way. Oh, sorry, just getting his name in my head. And he passed away actually a couple of years ago. Ian Holm played Ash, the android. So Ian Holm, they had 3D printed him basically into the back into the franchise, and he played a big part in Alien Romulus. So tell you what, I'll go and watch that. I'll check it out on Disney Plus. Although I'd have to renew my membership, I did cancel it. I'll check it out and tell you what I think. But I really was left with a bad taste in my mouth. And then, of course, there is the next thing that was released in the franchise, which was Alien Earth. And I knew that based on my experience uh, with the precious Disney, what had they had done, and kind of how Sigourney Weaver had mentioned they didn't want to go back to Earth and stuff like that. Like her, at least she didn't want to, and she's not in Alien Earth. Just listening to the people that have watched the first two episodes and others, I knew it was going to be terrible, terrible, terrible movie. So that's why I didn't bother watching it. Just a heads up. But if you guys want to like, share, love this commentary, my thoughts on it, and you want me to watch this, I'll watch it just for you guys. And I'll tell you what I think. But right now I'm avoiding it because I think Disney has ruined so many things that, and I think Alien in general, I don't know if 20th Century Fox knew what to do with it. They were just kind of blindsided by its success and left it sitting for so long. And Ridley Scott, I think James Cameron became super famous after Aliens because he did Titanic, right? They can't pay him enough to go back and do an Aliens franchise. He showed interest, and same with Terminator. He let that drop. So, but what happened to my precious baby? It was so good, and then it's so bad at the end. And it's not that hard to do this franchise. I mean, even I could probably logically put it together. And I'm interested. Where do you think this franchise could go? Did you enjoy it? Did you like the franchise? Was it something that, you thought was worth watching after all of this? Or are you like me? Like you after Covenant, you'd had enough. Like just what had they done to my baby boy? Like my goodness, it was such a good franchise, such a good universe. It wasn't as big as Star Wars, I'd say, nothing like that, but it was great. It was an awesome, well put together, well thought out, freaky kind of world. Like the comics were good too. Like when Dark Horse owned it, I owned some of the comics. Collected those. They knew what to do with it. Build on the characters, Newt, Hicks, all that stuff. Build that storyline, but they didn't, and they just kind of, yeah, they did a bad job with it. Anyways, I just want to thank you guys for watching. Remember, follow me on X at GenXRants SPD. Hit like, share, and subscribe because I need to build up the ranting nation. And I appreciate, if you got questions or thoughts, drop them down in the chats or in the comment section, and I will read everyone I can and reply to those I can't. As we grow, I, of course, can't reply to everything. But anything in there now, I'm going to say, hey, thanks for watching and all that stuff. And I appreciate you guys. This is Gen X Rants with Dave. I hope to just see you next time. We do 2 a day, hopefully. Hopefully, I'm new to this, so we're trying. All right, take care. Peace.